Welcome to the first episode of BoardGameCast. In this episode you will see a full session of the game Puerto Rico by Andreas Seefarf. This is one of my favorite games and it's been the favorite of many people considering that it stayed number one on BoardGameGeek for over 6 years before Agricola took over that position. You will see me set up for a 3-player game here, but we actually ended up with being 4 players. Now, my plan is not to attend every game that I record. Actually, I would like to only be commentating in most of the cases, but this is a trial and error thing, and for the first episodes at least you will see me attend most of the games. 2 balancing changes will be made in this game. You saw me switch the factory and the university on the general board, and that is because Andreas Seefarf himself has said that they probably are under and overpowered respectively for their costs. The factory is thus costing 8 in this game and the university is costing 7. The second balancing change we will see in this game is that the corn players start with 1 doubloon less, giving 2 instead of 3 in this game. The Puerto Rico Evolver has proven that the win rate for player 3 and 4 are significantly higher than for players 1 or 2. This is a 4-player game. Starting with the corn is an advantage, and to try and diminish that advantage they try different solutions, and the one that statistically is the most balanced is this one, to give the players 3 and 4 in this case 1 doubloon less. This will restrict them a little bit at the start and give players 1 and 2 a small advantage money wise. This is a 4-player game, as I said, and 2 of us are quite experienced at this game. It will be player 2 and 4 here, while Henning, player 1, has only played once before, and Jon, player 3, only a few times. Henrik has played quite a lot, and I am player 4 here, and I have played quite a lot. Henning decided to start with a settler, and I strongly feel that this is the strongest move for player 1. It's a very good opening move. I might have taken a quarry instead though, because that generally gives slightly larger advantage, but in this case there were 3 sugar, 1 tobacco and 1 coffee, and taking the coffee here is not a bad choice at all. He restricted player 3 and 4 to taking sugar, and that is very good for players 1 and 2. Picking up something else than the settler for player 1 is generally giving the other players a bit too much of advantage. He can't really pick mayor because that benefits only player 3 or 4, and he can't really build either because that would benefit player 2 a lot, starting indigo production very early. Henrik decides to build as player 2 here, and that is a strong move, although the prospector could have guaranteed him the tobacco storage in round 2, since he is starting play there. But he decided to build a hospice here. The hospice is a good building if you get it out early, but it costs quite a lot. With only 2 doubloons, player 3 and 4 here are quite restricted at what they can build. And Jon decides to build the small market. It's a very strong building, so it's nothing wrong with that. Since he decided to build the small market, I try to get the opportunity to be the only one producing sugar here, so I build a small sugar mill. Henning decides to pick up the last small market here, and it's a very good choice. Jon is now given a few choices, and he decides to take the mayor, and that's probably the best thing he can do right now. He can start producing his corn, and he can put colonists on his small market, giving him a chance to sell for a better price. So here you can see what I have decided to do in graphics wise. There are 70 colonists left in the supply, and there are 4 colonists on the boat, and you will see that those numbers change over the game. Here I don't have much choice at all, actually. I can't really produce, that would give Yoon too much of an advantage, and I can't really use the other rolls here because they give me nothing at all, so I just take the doubloon, and that is that. Second round. You will see a transition here, and that is an indication of me cutting out some of the video. The session was about 2 hours long, and I have tried to cut it down to about half of that. Henrik wants to start using his hospice, so he picks the settler. He decides to go with a sugar though, and I feel that the quarry would probably have been more beneficial to him. He likes to go for the factory, and the diversity that early in the game is an indication that he plans to do so this session as well. Yoon picks up the coffee, gaining good diversity in goods. Cheap one in corn, middle one in sugar, and the expensive coffee that he tries to sell later. I pick up the tobacco, since I really don't want to fight against the coffee that you will produce eventually. Yoon then decides to produce here, and it's a good choice since there's only 2 of us that actually will produce anything, and it's all corn. I'm happy with this. I get to pick the doubloon that is already on the trader, and I get 1 coin for selling the corn here, blocking Yoon in the process. Henning then decides to do a defensive move. He gets the coin from the captain. He would have gotten as much doubloons from other rolls, but he also prevents Yoon from picking it at the start of round 3, which would have given Yoon 2 coins as well as an extra point from when he shipped his corn. At the start of round 3, and Yoon decides to go builder. This is a strong move, simply because if he had left it to me, I would have been able to build my tobacco storage this turn and started producing it immediately, and he really does not want to give me that advantage. He also can start competing with the sugar, so that is good for him. I decide to pass, and that is to be able to build the tobacco storage next turn instead. I want to make sure that I can do that. Henning really is hard pressed to start producing something, so he builds a small indigo plant, and Henrik can't build at all. He has no money and he has no quarry. Note that if he had picked the quarry instead of the sugar, he could have built a small indigo plant here and been in a situation where he could have started producing this turn. I pick up the mayor because I really want to start my sugar, and unfortunately Yoon is also able to do that, but there's a small chance that someone will produce and give me the opportunity to sell sugar before Yoon here. In retrospect, it was a quite small probability, but you can take the chance from time to time. Still 4 colonists on the boat after the mayor phase. The only one not producing here now is Henrik. And he ends up picking the settler here to get a quarry. Could have done that earlier. One thing here is that he leaves corn for both Yoon and me, and we already have corn. And that sets up for shipping tactics. So I happily pick up that corn. I didn't think I would get it. Henning now has a choice to diversify and pick up tobacco or go into indigo. It looks like I will be able to build a tobacco storage, so he really does not want to be producing after me here. At the start of the 4th round, I immediately build my tobacco storage. I want to be able to produce that good. Since it looks like Henrik will not be able to produce tobacco for some while, it looks like I will be able to sell a few times and get good dividends out of that good before he gets into production as well. Henning wisely decides to hang back and not build anything, wanting to build that coffee roaster. And he takes the trader here to block, as well as get the coin, so he is guaranteed a coffee roaster next round. Henrik decides to build a small indigo plant to be able to produce something in the near future, and then takes the captain as a defensive move just to get the money on it. Yoon decides to produce here because he is guaranteed to sell at this point. He will sell the sugar before me, no matter who picks it up. He also gets an extra corn here that he will be able to get a victory point from. Round 5, and Henning decides to do the obvious move. He gets his coffee roaster, so he will be able to start producing coffee soon. And he really can't do anything else here. Henrik decides to go into a small sugar mill. Yes, it only costs 1, but still it's delaying that tobacco. I'm happy for myself because that gives me more room with the tobacco, but I feel that might not have been the best choice. Neither Yoon or me can build here. Yoon could have built something, but he decides to wait so he can get his coffee going as soon as possible. Henrik went for the mayor here. He wants to get some production going, and I can't complain. I can start producing tobacco after this. Yoon will be able to produce both corn and sugar, so he doesn't complain either. And you will see Henning eventually move his colonists around so he can start producing coffee. So he's quite happy with this as well. Henrik decides to leave a colonist on the hospice instead of the quarry, and since it will be a while before he can build the tobacco storage anyway, this is probably the correct choice. He can't really afford to move the colonist out of the hospice anyway, since he decided to spend all his initial money on that building, and it really needs to be filled to pay off. The first interesting event after Mayor comes here. The boat ends up with 5 colonists. Now, this means that the next person to pick up the mayor will get 3 colonists, while the others get 1. So the mayor role is becoming quite interesting now for future turns. Yoon does the obvious. He sells his sugar and picks up a nice bundle of money here. Henning sells his indigo to get some money, get a better fiscal position. I wish I could have been able to sell, and I bet that Henrik really wish he could have sold something here, but he has yet to produce a single good. I am left with quite an interesting choice here. I really don't want to pass on the prospector with 2 extra coins on it, but I have an opportunity to make quite a profit by picking the producer here. I'm the only one producing tobacco, and I am guaranteed to sell it. Also, I will make sure that no one else gets to sell, because the warehouse will be filled. So I decide to produce, although we already have some goods on our compass roses. I end up picking up an extra corn here, and I probably should have picked up an extra tobacco at this point, trying to sell that as quickly as possible. But I thought that I could get some extra points if I picked up that corn. With me producing at the end of round 5, the captain has become quite an interesting and lucrative choice now in round 6. But Henrik decides to give the hospice another whirl and picks up the settler again. It also gives him a doubloon, so it's not that bad of a choice. He decides to pick up his second tobacco, which is interesting considering he is still lacking the tobacco storage, so he can't produce yet. Jon gets his second coffee, I get my second tobacco, and Henning's left with a sugar. And as you can see, there's quite few corn plantations that comes into play in this game at the start of it. Jon now decides to pick up that captain, and as well as the doubloon, he gets a lot of points. He ships 3 corn for a total of 4 points with the bonus from the captain, and he's quite happy with that. My choice here is if I want to block the smaller boat or the medium boat with sugar, because I do not want to ship my tobacco, and there's no one that can block me from the last 2 spaces on the corn boat. I end up putting the sugar on the middle boat, leaving the small boat for Henning's coffee, which he is forced to ship here, and he did not like that at all. This is the problem with having only one good in production, because you can be forced to ship that boat, and especially if it's tobacco or coffee, that can cost you quite a lot. You really want 3 or 4 doubloons rather than 1 victory point in this stage of the game. Sugar goes on the sugar boat, Jon's sugar does likewise, and I fill up the corn boat, burning 2 corn barrels in the process. This goes to show that what I actually should have done earlier is to pick up an extra sugar. That would have given me an extra victory point instead of just an extra barrel to burn. I pick up the prospector and get some money, and Jon decides to get the mayor, and I was really debating if I wanted to get the mayor or the money, but I got 3 coins out of that prospector, and now Henning got 3 colonists while we got 1 each. I think that's a decent trade, and I really need the money at this stage, so I decided to go for the money. I already produce all my goods, So an extra tobacco or extra corn here wouldn't give me that much of an advantage, I feel, so the money is probably better for me. Henning really wanted the extra personnel, so he was quite happy that I left him the mayor. He will now produce 2 coffee as well as the protection good of indigo, although it's a bit too late since the coffee boat is already there. The colony ship end up with having 4 colonists on it again. Round 7, and Yoon wants to build. He has quite a lot of money at this stage, so he can build almost anything. But he does the obvious choice and starts producing his coffee, or gets ready for it. I decide to build a small warehouse here. That is also a debatable choice, and you will see later that I end up paying for that choice. I actually never use it. But my plan here was to go into the factory, and with diversifying that much, having a warehouse is a really good thing. Henning decides to go into producing sugar, or be able to eventually, while Henrik passes and wait for that tobacco storage facility. I then sell my tobacco here and empties the trade house with that move. That is what I was waiting to do all turn. Henning follows up with producing here. He is the only one producing coffee, and he will be guaranteed to sell it unless someone forces him to ship it. So that is good for him. He will probably be able to sell the indigo if he is forced to ship that coffee. It's all up to Henrik here. I'm quite happy that someone decided to produce here, because now I have another tobacco I can sell. So Henrik thinks about this here quite a long time, but he decides eventually to go for the stab. So instead of building his own position here, he goes for a double stab of Henning. Not only does he force Henning to ship his coffee, he will also force Henning to ship his indigo, so suddenly Henning has nothing he can sell. Both you and me ship what we can, although we will both be forced to burn some barrels. The sugar boat gets filled up and leaves for Spain, while the coffee boat, as you saw in the graphics, have 2 spots left. I would like to apologize for us moving the ships away from the camera view here. 8th round coming up. I have the possibility to sell my tobacco again uncontested, and that's a really strong choice. Unfortunately, I fail with my basic arithmetic here. I managed to get 3 plus 1 to equal 5, and that is not correct. I swear that I do not intend to cheat here, but sometimes mistakes happen. Fortunately, I end up never using that extra coin. I always have at least 1 coin in my bank, so it did not affect the outcome of the game. Henning actually saw that something was wrong, but due to him being inexperienced of the game, he didn't notice exactly what. Jon got to sell his corn for a doubloon. Henning now decides to produce and takes an extra coffee. He's still the only one producing coffee, and this way he is guaranteed to have at least one coffee left if someone forces him to ship it. This is a good timing move as well, because if he waits, Jon will probably be able to produce coffee as well, and that would make Henning selling coffee a much more scary proposition. Henrik finally builds his tobacco storage facility, and that was a long time coming. He really needed that building up and running much earlier to be able to compete in this game. June passes, and I decide to deviate from my original plan. I say to myself, well, I usually build a factory, I want to try something different. And there's nothing wrong with going with this strategy since I had so much money at this point, but I end up taking the wharf, thinking that I would go into a harbor as soon as possible, but I already had that small warehouse, and when you have a warehouse you don't need a wharf. You can probably save the goods for later and ship it on a later turn instead. So I ended up screwing myself here. And as noted on the screen, we now caught that we have no colonists on the boat. So we quickly fixed that situation. You could have said that no, it's only going to be 4 since we didn't do it immediately, but nothing changed by us doing it at this point in time. So we added the 7 that was supposed to be there. Henning starts around 9 by selling his coffee, and that was really what he wanted to do. And Henrik gets to fill the last spot. Henrik now decides to pick up that extra colonist, and he gets 3 here, while Jon and me get 2 each. Henning gets only 1. Jon here has all his buildings and plantations filled, so he was quite happy with that move. He didn't need to pick it up himself. I'm quite happy as well, because I produce all my goods and have both my buildings filled, especially the wharf here. That is also the reason why I decided to produce all 3 of the goods instead of going for only corn and tobacco. Jon then picks up the settler and the money on it, and then goes with a quarry. I pick up my 3rd tobacco. He's quite happy with that. And Henning goes for a 3rd indigo. Henrik is left with a 2nd sugar. I now decided between taking captain and taking the money. And after realizing that the indigo boat would actually not be filled, I wanted to empty as many boats as possible, I ended up picking the money. When you have a diversity of goods, you really want the boats to be either empty or in your goods types, because you want to be able to ship as much as possible. The production engines are pretty much done here, so it's good to transition into building points instead of money. But you still want enough money to be able to build the big buildings in the end. Henrik starts out round 10 by picking up the builder, and he builds a large sugar mill. His plan is obviously going into a lot of production here. Yoon follows up with the factory. It's a strong move. He has a good economy already, and he has a diversity of goods, so he can probably utilize it for a strong building strategy here. I pass. I have no money to spend, and Henning picks up the large indigo plant, so he can utilize that indigo he just picked up in the settler's phase. Yoon follows up the builder's phase by picking up the captain, and he gets 2 doubloons in that, so it's a really good move, as well as the bonus point he gets from shipping here. He has made a lot of points by shipping already in this game, so he will be in a good position to win it. Small boat here ends up getting filled with coffee. That was to be expected. While both the middle boat and the large boat ends up being only partially filled and not emptied at all. Yes. 3 spaces left for corn, but only 1 space left for indigo at this point. I pick up the trader for the 3rd time in this game, trading my tobacco. It's actually my 4th time picking up the trader. So I get to sell again. Quite happy with that. I'm the only one who sold this turn as well, so that was a nice little bonus there. With the acquisition of the large indigo plant, Henning really needs colonists, so he picks up the mayor. He goes into both sugar and indigo production here, as well as the coffee he already produces. Neither Henrik nor Yoon has any real difficult decision to make here. I am left with the decision to man or not man my small storage facility, and realize that I don't need it since I have the wharf. The colony boat ends up with an even number here, dividable by the number of players, so it's not that much of an advantage picking up the mayor next time. And Yoon goes through his movements, trying to decide on a role. He's using a method of exclusion here. Which role does he not want to pick? So that is one way to do it. He ends up choosing between the settler and the producer, and finally decides on the producer. He's now producing coffee as well, and he would like to be able to sell that. Had the trader house been empty here, he probably would not have produced, because then I would be able to sell tobacco yet again. And as you can see, people are starting to produce quite a lot of goods here. So the captain's phase are getting more and more interesting. With that many goods out, I decide that shipping must be the best choice. I could have sold my sugar here, and that would leave Yoon out of the trader, but I would lose out points if I did that. First I intended to ship my corn first, but then I noticed that Yoon did not pick up an extra corn, he picked up an extra coffee. So instead I decided to block the small boat with sugar, trying to burn some of Yoon's goods. Henning fills up the indigo boat, no one can block him from the sugar boat. Henrik can do nothing but filling up the sugar boat with 1 sugar. Yoon is in the same spot, he can fill up the corn or the sugar, and since he cannot be blocked from the sugar, he decides to go for corn first. I still have my wharf here, and I see that I cannot sell tobacco for quite a while, so I decided to ship those as well. And then all the boats are emptied. They were all full of goods. Yoon has to burn 2 barrels of coffee, and I'm quite happy with that. Especially since Henning then decides to sell, which means that Yoon cannot. Yoon's financial situation are quite awesome though. He has a factory that is active and he produces coffee, so he can quite easily get quite a lot of money. I wish that I had a good income here, but I decided to go for a shipping strategy, and that if you go too heavily into one strategy, that is what ends up happening. You really want a balanced strategy to have the best chance of winning here. I still felt I had a quite good opportunity to win this game though, because I had a plan at this point. I was going for the harbor. It's the most expensive strategy in the game, but if it is executed well enough, then it can pay off really well. Round 12 and I execute that plan. I build my harbor. That will mean that with my own boat and the eventual production of 3 or 4 goods, I can rake in points very easily every time someone picks the cat. Henning puts the final nail in Henrik's coffin here by picking up the factory. Not that Henrik would have been able to purchase it anyway. He simply does not have the economy for it. Yoon actually has enough money here to build a prestige building, and he ends up picking the customs house, not only because he has shipped quite a lot already, but also because I'm going such a heavy shipping strategy that he really does not want me to get it. Henning then picks up the mayor. He has been the one to pick up the mayor for the last few times. Picking the mayor can be quite dangerous because that is one of the roles that benefit the other players almost as much as it does yourself, but since he has the factory that he really wants to man, and he has quite a lot of need of colonists, it's not a bad choice. Yoon has that many colonists at this point that he's not really bothered with colonists, so he can man his prestige building already, giving him those extra points, assuring that he will have it manned at the end of the game. You really do not want to end up getting a prestige building that you cannot activate by manning it with colonists, because that means it was quite an expensive investment that did not quite pay off. Henrik settles, get another colonist here, and he has quite a lot of production at this point. He finally got that corn he wanted. Yoon again uses his process of elimination and end up selling his coffee here to get a new boost of doubloons. Since he gets 6 doubloons for this trade, he's almost the entire way up to another prestige building at this point. And I myself are quite far away at this point. I really need to be able to sell another tobacco to be able to get there, and I need it quite soon. Round 13, and Henning is thinking about what to do, and while he does that, Henrik notices something is missing here, so we fill up the colony ship finally. And I don't think that it would have made any difference, but we go by the rules and only fill it up with 4 colonists. Henning ends up picking the prospector, building his stash of doubloons up towards that magical point where he can build a prestige building. And then Henrik once again picks the settler, getting another colonist, and this time on a corn plantation. There was quite a lot of corn to choose from here, so both Yoon and me end up with a corn as well. Henning ends up with his 3rd coffee. He will never be able to utilize that plantation, but it doesn't harm him at this point in the game, since he won't be able to fill up his plantation spaces anyway. Yoon decides to build here. Not a bad choice, considering that there's only 2 players that really have the economy to build something. To maximize the effect of his factory, he goes into the large indigo plant. And I decide to go to the small version of that plant to be able to maximize my harbor. Henning thinks about it and then decides that he does not want to risk burning excess barrels when the captain comes around, so he builds a small warehouse here. Henrik still has very bad economy and cannot build anything at all. I'm in quite a tough spot here. I do not want to produce because that would give Henrik first opportunity for a trader, and he would fill it up with tobacco. It will also give Yoon first opportunity to the captain next turn, and that would give him a lot of points. especially since he has the customs house. So I decided to do something different. I decided to activate my indigo plant so I can utilize the effect of my harbor better. I could have picked up the captain preemptively, but that wouldn't have given me very much. And I really don't think that Henrik is interested in producing here, so I go for a safer route. Since quite a few large production buildings were just built here, there are quite few empty places on the buildings, leaving the colony ship with 9 colonies. It's quite a big hit for the colonies supply here. The next time someone picks mayor, that person will get 4 colonists while the others get 2, so that's quite significant as well. But Henrik decides to do something entirely different. This is quite a clever move actually. He wants someone else to pick production. So he himself picks the captain. Why would he do that? Well, if someone picks the producer now, the others won't be able to ship this turn, giving him the chance to sell, for instance, or maybe even get a better position to ship later. He also lessens the bonus of the captain if it were picked in a later turn. Ewan here decides to go for that advantage in colonists, taking 4. With only 7 colonists left in the supply, the game end is approaching rather quickly now. But then again, we just filled up most of the spots, so it probably won't be enough with only 1 mayor being picked here to end the game. After some thought, I decided to take Henrik up on that offer of producing. I really would like to sell tobacco here, but then again I can get those extra barrels and be guaranteed to ship most of them. So I produce 4 types of goods here. But all players produce a lot of barrels. The production engine of Henrik here has really kicked into gear, but he has quite a lot of ground to cover to reach the other players and compete for the victory. He can't really put up a fight, and he knows it at this point. It's too much of a delay before he managed to produce goods. He took his time, and the other players just ran with the momentum they were given. So he knows it's pretty much over at this point. Both Jon and Henning get doubloons from their factories here, and Jon is looking really strong at this point. He has enough money here to be able to build a second prestige building when next turn comes around. Henning has last choice for this round here. And he has a few choices. The interesting point to make here is that he can't sell coffee because the coffee is already placed in the trading house, and he does not have the office, so he can't make a really huge profit he otherwise would be able to make. But he still can sell the sugar and utilize his small market. So with the doubloon that was on the trade already, he still makes quite a profit. Henrik quickly sells his indigo, which leaves Jon with a choice of selling a corn and getting one doubloon from his small market, or leaving it and probably getting another victory point in the upcoming captain's phase. He decides that leaving me with another tobacco trade is just too good, so wisely he chooses to sell that corn. That blocks me out from trading and leaves me without the opportunity to buy prestige building soon. Round 15, and Jon has first pick. He has enough money to be able to build a prestige building even if someone else picks up the builder, at least if he picks up something that has a doubloon on it. But after some debate he decides to pick it up himself, because that gives him the choice of prestige building first. And he really wants the fortress at this point, because that is the best one that is left for him. It also would give all the players quite a lot of bonus points. So he decides to be the one to pick up building first. I have to pass here, still in the hope of getting a prestige building, and Henning decides to pick up the guild hall. He has quite a few production buildings already, and he will probably be able to build more before game end. Henrik doesn't build anything either, and then I pick up the captain that Jon left me. I make a huge profit here in victory points, since I have both the wharf and the harbor and quite the amount of wares to sell. I start by putting my 4 tobacco on the small boat, blocking that boat for the other players, except for Henrik that will be able to ship 1 barrel there. Henning puts indigo on the middle boat and Henrik puts corn on the big boat. Jon follows suit with the corn on the big boat, and I am now able to put my indigo without risking blockage of the corn. The players then go around putting what they can on the boats, and I am thinking about actually shipping my corn on my own ship here to be able to be the only one with corn in the upcoming turn. But I go for the immediate points here and ship what corn I can, since I will be able to ship sugar on my own ship. That means I got 4 bonus points from the harbor this turn. That is really, really good, especially since I got the 5th bonus point from picking the captain itself. Henning then decides to go with a trader, picking up the big bucks from selling his coffee, and the only one who is able to sell other than Henning is Henrik. I guess I could sell my corn, but it would give me no profit, so I decide to keep it for points in the next shipping phase. the boats are emptied. We kind of forgot about that, but no harm done. So 3 empty boats and Henrik's choice of role. He goes for the money, trying to set himself up for a prestige building before game's end. The only one that is more or less guaranteed not to get the prestige building in this game at this point in time is me. I do not have enough money to be able to build one now, and I cannot sell tobacco even if it's produced. I still make a stab at getting enough money to build something by picking up the settler here, which gives me 2 doubloons. A quarry at this point in time is pretty pointless to me, so I pick up my 4th corn. Maybe I will be able to get a colonist on that one and produce another point-given barrel. Henning gets his first and only corn at this point in time. Since we have gone through all of the available plantation tiles, I mix up the discarded ones earlier and fill up with those. Henning then goes for the mayor. And the main point in doing so is that he wants to activate his prestige building. He doesn't want to miss out on those points. He also activates his corn, so he will be able to compete in that field as well. Actually, anyone but Henrik here could decide to end the game. There are a lone colonist left in the supply, and if anyone would have wanted to end the game immediately, I could have decided to put 1 extra colonist away from the buildings down to the plantations. And this is because it's open information. Henrik now picks up the builder. That is what he has been waiting to do. And from the 2 remaining prestige buildings, he decides to go with the residence. His choice here is quite simple, because the residence will give him at least 5 bonus points, while the city hall would give him a maximum of 3 bonus points if he manages to build another purple building next turn. I decide to build something that gives him points here. I have given up the race to the prestige building, and the city hall would not give me much points anyway, so I just spend my money on the cheapest building I can get my hands on. That still gives me points. Henning builds the tobacco storage, which gives him 3 points in itself, but also 2 bonus points for his prestige building, so that's quite nice for him. Ewan then decides to produce. At this point in time, the amount of production facilities are quite staggering, and in this production phase, Henrik will end up not getting all of the goods he can produce because the corn barrels run out. This is more prevalent when there are goods on the ships, but in this case the only goods that were in play, so to speak, were the ones on the trade house and the ones on the compass roses, and only me and Henning had any barrels saved. The upcoming captain's phase in the next round will be an interesting one, because there's simply so many barrels out that it's really a game of trying to maximize your own victory points when shipping, and that is set against trying to minimize the opponent's gains in the same phase. Henning really does the sane choice here by picking up the captain, because that means he will be the one to set a pace in the shipping phase, and he's guaranteed to get as much value out of the shipping as possible. And he starts by putting indigo on the small ship. I'm not very worried about this, because I only have one indigo, and I will probably be able to ship that anyway. And I'm really glad when Henrik decides to put tobacco on the middle boat, because I'm the only one with tobacco. So that means that I don't have to worry about getting shut out with one of my large wares. When Yoon then decides to fill up the indigo boat, I know that I will not be able to put indigo on there, so I now have the choice of blocking off the big boat with sugar. That means I will still be able to get my tobacco on the tobacco boat. I will always be able to ship my corn on my own ship, and the big boat is now not available for coffee, for example. So I felt that this was quite a good blocking move. Henning then puts the only thing he can put on the boats, is sugar. Henrik puts his sugar on the boat, and Jonas as well. And I am now the only one left with anything to ship, and that is 3 barrels of tobacco. And on my own ship I put away 5 barrels of corn. So that is quite a lot of points. Henrik now decides to not taking a gamble and picks up the mayor and fills his prestige building. It is the same choice. He would most likely not be able to get it manned if he passed up on that roll. Yoon then picks up the only roll that's left that can give points to anyone. With the exception of the settler, of course, because if someone picks the settler, Henrik would be given an extra bonus point from his residence. But Yoon picks very wisely the builder and spends his money on the biggest building he can afford. In my case, I cannot afford anything, and is left with that single coin that I erroneously got earlier. Henning then finishes by building the large sugar mill, gaining the maximum bonus points for guild hall. Observe that you don't need to have the production buildings manned to get the bonus points for the guild hall. And the game is over since Henrik cannot build anything, and the last action of the game is more or less void since it doesn't give any points. June ends up winning by a single point over me, and then Henning comes another 3 points behind that. Henrik was quite far behind. As a final reflection over this game, I would say that June really played a solid game here. He timed his actions very well and managed to utilize the factory to great effect. Being one of the two main corn producers and shippers did absolutely help here. I thought I played a good game, except for that faux pas with the small warehouse. It was really a mistake to build it. Or rather, once I had it, I should not have gone wharf. I should have gone a factory instead. I probably would have won the game if I had done that. On the other hand, the wharf did give a lot of points during this game. Henning played a very well game, especially considering that he has played only once before, and he was very close to winning it, I feel. If he had been able to ship a few barrels more, instead of picking the major perhaps, then he could have won the game with his balanced strategy. Henrik was far behind because he took far too long building that first production building. He was left out of the production race for quite some time and ended up with a poor economy, and that spelled the doom for him this game. All in all, it was a nice game, and I hope you enjoyed this session as much as we did. And that marks the end of this first episode of BoardGameCast. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below or in a message on BoardGameGeek. My BoardGameGeek name is Mordachai, spelt the way as was shown at the start of the video. I hope that you will join me again next time, when I will show you a session of a game I have never played before. Bye bye!